Day 142 of the war in Gaza and intense clashes with anti-terror operations against Hamas operatives continuing from air, land, and sea. IDF Chief of Staff Halevi held an assessment with eyes towards the final Hamas stronghold in Rafah. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Dozens of Hamas operatives were killed over the weekend during fighting in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis, and a large mop-up operation against Hamas cells emerging in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood. In Zaytun, the IDF says the 401st Armored Brigade, using a drone, spotted a Hamas cell planning to fire anti-tank missiles. The troops quickly called in an airstrike. Many more Hamas operatives were killed in Zaytun during gun battles and by airstrikes. Troops also located many Hamas weapons, along with documents. In central Gaza, the Nahal Brigade killed a number of Hamas gunmen over the weekend, including by calling in airstrikes. In Khan Yunis, the IDF says intensive fighting continues, with the Givati Brigade killing Hamas operatives with sniper fire and the 7th Armored Brigade killing numerous more operatives with tank shelling and by calling in airstrikes. Holding an assessment inside Gaza, IDF Chief of Staff Halevi related to the connection between the battlefield advances and the talks to release Israeli hostages.
אנחנו בימים גם של משא ומתן על שחרור החטופים. לא יודע להגיד לאן זה יתפתח. יש מי שעוסק בזה, אנחנו עוסקים בלחימה. אני רוצה שתדעו דבר אחד, יש קשר בין הדברים. ההישגים שלכם, עוד גדוד שאתם מפרקים, עוד תשתית קרקע, עוד שכונה שמבצעים שם את השמדת התשתיות והאוכלוסייה שמתפנה למרחבים בטוחים, כל הדברים האלה ביחד לוחצים אותנו, אני מקווה מאוד, גם להישג בעניין שחרור החטופים.
Halevi made clear that freeing the hostages remains a central goal of the war, and military pressure brings the objective ever closer.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has for the first time issued a plan for the post-war management of Gaza. Netanyahu's vision includes a security buffer zone inside Gaza and free movement of the IDF and local Palestinian administration. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's plan for post-war Gaza envisions the IDF having indefinite freedom to operate throughout Gaza to prevent any resurgence of terror activity. It includes the establishment of a security buffer zone on the Palestinian side of the Strip's border. The plan also calls to install local Gazan officials unaffiliated with terrorists to administer services in the Strip instead of Hamas. It indicates Egyptian cooperation to end smuggling into Gaza, for Arab countries to fund reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, and for the closing down of UNRWA. The document calls for Gaza to be demilitarized and for its population to be de-radicalized.
So Netanyahu really did telegraph some of this. I think the fact that you're having civilian technocratic control in his plan, but absolutely no Palestinian authority being part of a Gaza political system or leadership system is really important. The fact that you have, once again, more security control by Israel, both along the Israeli-Gaza border, in which you're going to see more security barriers and fencing done.
In Washington, a White House spokesman was cool to the plan, saying the Biden administration wants the Palestinian people to have a voice and a vote through a revitalized Palestinian Authority. The U.S. has been pushing for a reformed PA to take over the governance of Gaza the day after the war, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected outright. The document of principles Netanyahu presented to security cabinet ministers did not specify or name the PA or rule out its participation in the post-war governance of Gaza. The Netanyahu plan cannot be implemented without control of Rafah. Netanyahu is due to summon the cabinet to approve operational plans for the Strip's southern city, including evacuating citizens in order to avoid increased tensions with Egypt. Israel will reportedly give Egypt assurances ahead of the ground operation near its border.
In Paris, Israeli and international mediators agreed on an outline for a deal to release Israeli hostages in exchange for an extended pause in fighting. Hamas has yet to give its approval, but Mossad chief David Barnea reported progress in Paris, and the war cabinet voted to send a delegation to Qatar for more talks. More from ILTV's Ariella Lahiani.
The Qatari, Egyptian and US mediated framework is said to include a 6-week truce and release of 35 to 40 hostage women, children, female soldiers, elderly and ill captives. Mossad chief David Barnea headed the Israel's delegation to Paris, where he conferred with CIA Director William Burns, Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Al-Thani, and Egyptian intelligence chief Abbas Kamel. An Israeli official said there was significant progress and a solid basis for discussions, but cautioned there was still a long way to go. The cabinet thought enough of the progress in Paris to approve sending a delegation to Qatar for continuing mediation efforts. Mediators are working to have the pause in fighting and the hostage deal in place ahead of the Ramadan holiday beginning on March 10th. Thousands of people held a vigil in Tel Aviv last night for the 134 hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza. After mediation efforts yielded progress in Paris, the vigil was noticeably upbeat and optimistic compared to the mood of near hopelessness at rallies in recent weeks.
Where we have in Paris the leading negotiators of the Israeli team, the U.S. put in front of all the parties a fair deal, and now we are waiting for the cabinet of Israel to see the aspect of that deal and hopefully wish to move forward with that in order for us to end the living hell of over 141 days that we've been living, waiting to see any sign of life from our son.
Many details remain to be worked out before a hostage deal can be put into motion. Among other demands Netanyahu has called delusional, Hamas insists on the release of thousands of Palestinian security prisoners, while Israel is seeking a more reasonable ratio of prisoners for hostages.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
And now joining us to discuss the announcement of Netanyahu's plan for the Gaza Strip is veteran journalist Ben-Dror Yumini. Ben-Dror Yumini, always great to have you on the show. Let me start off by asking, is this plan actually possible? Is this something that Israel could really pull off, in particular, the de-radicalization element?
No, it's not easy. I mean, actually, it did not work in any other place. But anyway, it's good that we have a plan, even if it's not going to be implemented as is. It's good because we have something to speak about. We have to speak. I mean, de-radicalization, of course, it's something that we all need, something that we are all looking for. It's part of the problem, and we all know it. But we have a beginning. We have something to speak with the American, with the Israeli public. So it's something positive, even if we all know that not every part in the Netanyahu plan that was just presented Friday is going to be implemented. Not at all.
Now, how can it be implemented practically on the ground without some element of de-radicalization? I mean, this has been such a core component of Palestinian society, the incitement to violence.
Yeah, we are facing a real problem because actually when you look at global comparison, you find out that actually Palestinians are the most radicalized. I mean, you don't have a lot of support in the Muslim brothers around the Muslim countries because they are suffering from them. We have to bear in mind that wherever we have jihad or this kind of political Islam, the outcome is destruction, bloodshed, and so on. We see exactly what's happening in Lebanon, in Somalia, in Yemen, in many other places. But the point is that they are totally supported by the West. They are totally supported not by the West, but by the progressive circles in the West. Look at all the demonstrations. People are shouting, Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, turn another ship around, which is crazy, which is totally crazy. So Palestinians see it. I'm speaking about leaders. I'm speaking about common people. And they say, I mean, if they are supporting this kind of jihad, how can we not support? So part of the blame should be on the shoulders of many circles in the West, that they are helping actually not the moderate Muslims. And we do have moderate Muslims in many countries, but they do support the radical Muslims, unfortunately.
Now, given that this plan would involve evacuation of a significant number of Gazans, how likely is it that other Arab states will be assisting in the implementation of this plan? For example, Egypt. And, where is the Palestinian Authority in all of this?
It's very interesting because, I mean, so many countries are speaking in favor of the people of Gaza. I mean, if you want so much to help them, why don't you absorb them? We know exactly that if Gaza will stay as it was, if Gaza will not change all the way, if Gaza will not pass the process of de-radicalization, the outcome will be that in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, it's going to be all the same. Now, they speak a lot, they do zero. They just do zero. But it doesn't mean that we should lose hope, because we cannot lose hope, because we can see what happened, for example, in the Emirates. They passed through a process against radicalization. I mean, it took them years, but we see the result. Something of that kind is happening also in Saudi Arabia. So maybe, just maybe, if as part of the plan, there will be states like the Emirates, maybe even Saudi Arabia, we will see change. It will not be in 1 year or 2 years, but maybe for some years it might happen. We saw exactly what happened, for example, with UNRWA. UNRWA was part of the process of radicalization. And yes, we have to change, but it doesn't mean that we are going to implement the Netanyahu plan. I'm not sure that he's going to be prime minister in 1 or 2 or 3 years. I don't know. We don't know. So we have to wait and see. But as I said, it's good that we have a plan on the table.
Yeah, certainly.
Something to begin with.
Certainly. First few steps are the most important, as they say. Ben-Dror Yumini, thank you so much for joining us. As usual, excellent insight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The U.S.-Israel relations are again facing tensions after U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reversed a U.S. policy position on Israeli settlements. Let's take a closer look. In a surprise move, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated yesterday that the Biden administration views Israeli settlements as inconsistent with international law, a stark contrast with the Trump administration, which implemented the Pompeo Doctrine, which deemed settlements not per se inconsistent with international law.
It's been long-standing U.S. policy under Republican and Democratic administrations alike that new settlements are counterproductive to reaching an enduring peace. They're also inconsistent with international law. Our administration maintains a firm opposition to settlement expansion.
This news comes in the aftermath of Israel announcing the building of 3,000 new housing units in Judea and Samaria in response to a terror attack this week. The Pompeo Doctrine, implemented in 2019 under the Trump administration, had reversed a 1978 State Department position deeming the settlements illegal. The Biden administration's announcement comes as a big blow to the state of Israel as tensions continue to rise between the two allies over the Israel-Gaza war and settlement expansion. In response to the announcement, former Secretary Pompeo stated that Judea and Samaria are rightful parts of the Jewish homeland and Israelis have a right to live there. After this policy reversal from the Biden administration, many Israelis are understandably displeased, with many criticizing the decision. Here to speak with us is Mayor of Efrat, Oded Revivi. Oded, thank you so much for joining us. First off, what is your take on this policy reversal?
I think it's important to understand that President Biden, like many other politicians, is a politician who is also running a campaign to be reelected as President of the United States. Obviously, his decision is extremely upsetting for me in personal, and also for all the rest of the residents in the state of Israel, and especially in Judea and Samaria. But I would like actually to examine him rather than on his words, on his actions. And if he's saying those things in order to base his campaign within the Democratic Party, that's one thing. But when we see what the American administration has been doing in the last 4 months, and the aid for us to carry on the war that we are fighting in order to protect and provide safety and security to the residents of the State of Israel, the ammunition that's being flown over here, the aircraft carriers that are around our sea shores, all these things are definitely showing that even President Biden, with a Democratic administration, is behind the State of Israel. So to sum it up, I am upset with his decision, but I would like more to examine him on his actions rather than on his words.
Now, it is true that there are many scholars and experts who claim that settlements are illegal. I'd like to hear from you. Why do you believe they are wrong, and what are they missing?
I think Israel for many years has been arguing that the settlements are not against the international law. And if I want to sum it up in one basic claim, the argument that Israel's presence here and building towns and cities in Judea and Samaria is against the international law is based on the assumption that this is occupied territories. Those people who accuse Israel with being here on occupied territories fail to see one very significant historical event. Israel was attacked on the Six-Day War in 1967 on all fronts, and basically under the belief of the Arab countries that they will push us into the sea, and if they attack us coordinatedly enough, they will be able to take this land over. With some miraculous act, the wheel turned around and Israel found itself widening its border in the east, in the south, and also in the north. But afterwards, we were the ones who invented the equation of land for peace, thinking that these areas that we conquered, released, occupied, use whichever politically correct term you want, we will offer it as peace offerings, and in return we'll get peace. But when we signed the peace agreement with Egypt, and later on with Jordan, they basically signed a waiver in writing that they don't want the land, they don't want the Gaza Strip, they don't want Judea, Samaria, or East Jerusalem. And when they signed that waiver in writing, a legal transformation happens. You can't call it occupied territories if the previous occupier has signed a waiver in writing unwanted goods. At the best case scenario, you can call it disputed territories. And if you change already the legal terminology into disputed territories, there is nothing in the international law against what Israel is doing in these areas of land. So therefore, people don't follow through the legal arguments, they don't follow through the historical arguments, and then they would understand that there is no backing for their accusation that what's happening here is against international law.
Now, if these settlements are deemed illegal by the United States, what practical impact does this have, both in terms of Israel's battle for legitimacy as well as on the ground, practically?
I think it creates a bad atmosphere. I don't think it really creates any significant change than what we knew in the past. It is an issue which is disputed between Israel and the international community. It just means that the foreign ministry, the Israeli government, needs to work harder in order to explain the legal arguments, what we're doing here is not against the international law, why we're entitled to do it, and why at the end of the day, the actions taken by the Israeli government don't only provide housing for more families who have a desire to live in this region, but also raise the level of security for the other parts of the country.
Now, what do you think, you mentioned a little bit about the political motivation. What do you think is the motivating factor behind this policy reversal? Is it just the elections, or does the administration really believe what they're claiming now?
I can't read their minds and thoughts. I think you suggested beforehand that if they would have done it at the beginning of the term, it would have seen that that's the policy they want to carry out. The fact that they're doing it now, in the last months of this term, with when it's uncertain whether President Biden will get reelected or not, I think it's really more to serve his political internal agenda than really an indication of a change of policy that's going to take place now in the last few months of his term, with really no time to create any such significant issues that maybe he's suggesting.
Oded, thank you so much for joining us on these important topics. The heavy cross-border exchanges are continuing daily between the IDF and Hezbollah terrorists on the Israeli-Lebanese border, with no end in sight. But there is speculation that a potential pause in fighting in Gaza could also bring at least a temporary quiet in the north. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Hezbollah fired heavy-caliber Birkin rockets at northern Israel. Drones targeted Kiryat Shmona and military positions near the border. Israeli warplanes targeted a house in the southern border town of Blida. IDF artillery shelled Hezbollah assets in the southern Lebanon border town of Kafr Kela. Israeli warplanes struck Hezbollah launch pads and infrastructure in the Blat Mountain area, and an observation post was targeted in the Aita al-Shab area. While there is no end in sight in the cross-border exchanges, Israeli officials are saying that a deal for a pause in Gaza fighting could lead to an agreement between Lebanon and Israel. Officials believe that during a pause in Gaza fighting, Hezbollah will give Lebanon the green light to engage in serious negotiations for a diplomatic arrangement which will allow the return of residents to their homes and push Hezbollah 10 kilometers north of the border. Meanwhile, the IDF continues preparing for the potential need for a ground operation to push Hezbollah back from the border by force if a diplomatic solution is not found. The troops say they are ready when called.
Personally, I feel like it's what I have to do. There's no question about it. Like, this is what we have to do. We know there is a threat. We see them, we hear them, we know what they want to do. So there's absolutely no question. There's difficulties, obviously, with being here for so long, but absolutely no question about it.
Since Hezbollah initiated cross-border attacks in October, at least 276 people have been killed on the Lebanese side of the border, most of them Hezbollah terrorists. On the Israeli side, 10 soldiers and 6 civilians have been killed.
As Israel continues the battle against Hamas and the Gaza Strip, U.S. and U.K. forces are battling the Iranian regime-backed Houthis in Yemen, who have been striking international ships in the Red Sea, disrupting international shipping routes.
The Houthis, a proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran, have continued to strike international ships since October 7th in solidarity with Hamas in Gaza. In the last 45 days, they fired at 45 commercial and naval vessels, and also struck the U.S.-owned bulk carrier MV Sea Champion, which was on its way to Yemen with humanitarian aid for Yemen.
تؤكد القوات المسلحة اليمنية على أنها ستواجه التصعيد الأمريكي البريطاني بالمزيد من العمليات العسكرية النوعية ضد كافة الأهداف المعادية في البحرين الأحمر والعربي دفاعا عن بلدنا وشعبنا وأمتنا.
In response to the ongoing attacks, the UK and US have intensified targeted strikes against the Houthis, hitting 18 targets in multiple locations across Yemen. The strikes targeted Houthi suicide drones, air defense systems, weapon storage facilities, and helicopters. On Saturday, the US also shot down an anti-ship ballistic missile launched into the Gulf of Aden from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, likely targeting the Torm Thor, a US flag-owned and operated tanker. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin stated that the strikes aim to further disrupt and degrade the capabilities of the Iranian-backed Houthi militia to conduct their destabilizing and reckless attacks against U.S. and international vessels.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around the country tonight, with lows of around 9 degrees Celsius or 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we will see the cloudy skies out alongside steady top temperatures, seeing highs of about 16 degrees Celsius or 62 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.